Some
The
nights arrive
shadows
quietly, without
hold more
warning,
truth
without
than the
ceremony.
light.
Just a soft shift in the air, a sense that the world is holding its breath. And yet, those nights become the ones a person never forgets. Ronald Reagan had such a night, long before fame, long before politics, long before the world ever placed expectations on his shoulders. There was a single knock at a door that changed his life in a way no one else ever knew. It happened in his early 20s, sometime between hope and uncertainty. That strange season of life when a young man is not yet who he will become, but no longer who he used to be. He was living in a small rented room above a shop in town, trying to stretch each paycheck, trying to keep warm through the winter, trying to find a sense of direction in days that all felt the same. That night had been unusually cold. The wind slid through cracks in the windows, rattling them softly. Outside, the street lamps flickered, casting long shadows across the empty sidewalk. Reagan was sitting alone at his small wooden table, nursing a cup of weak coffee, going over his notes for the morning broadcast. He had been practicing the cadence of his voice, trying to sound confident even when he felt anything but. He rubbed his eyes, exhausted. The day had been long, and the loneliness of the evening pressed against him like a weight. He missed home. He missed familiar voices. He missed the feeling of belonging, something he rarely admitted, even to himself. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each sound echoing louder in the quiet room. Tick, tick, tick. Tick-that then, softly, almost like an accident. There was a knock, just one dot, not loud, not urgent, just a knock dot. Reagan froze. No one ever knocked on his door at that hour. No one even climbed the narrow steps leading to his room, unless it was daytime and the shop owner needed to speak with him. He waited, holding his breath. Nothing. Maybe he imagined it. Then, another knock. Softer this time, almost cautious. Reagan stood slowly, his heart beating a little faster. He set his coffee aside and took a step toward the door. Something in the air felt different, heavy, uncertain, expectant. As he reached the door, he hesitated. His hand hovered over the knob. A strange chill traveled up his spine, not from fear, but from a sense that he was standing on the edge of something important. He opened the door halfway. At first he saw only the dim glow of the hallway light, flickering slightly, as if struggling to stay awake. Then, his eyes adjusted, and he saw a figure standing just outside his doorway. A silhouette, shoulders slumped, head lowered, hands clasped nervously. Reagan's voice came out quietly, uncertain. "Can I help you?" The figure shifted. The hallway light caught the man's face, older than Reagan expected. Worn, tired, with eyes that carried years of something heavy and unspoken. His coat was too thin for the cold night, and his breath formed faint clouds in the air. The man swallowed before speaking. "Are you Ronald Reagan?" Reagan's pulse quickened. "Yes, that's me." The man let out a shaky breath, one that sounded more like relief than anything else. "Good," he whispered. "Good." Reagan stepped back instinctively, opening the door wider. "Is everything all right, sir?" The man didn't answer right away. He stared at Reagan's face as if searching for something familiar, something comforting, something that made sense. Finally, he spoke, voice trembling slightly. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be awake," he said. "But I didn't know where else to go." Reagan felt something tighten in his chest, a mixture of concern and deep curiosity. "Come in," he said gently. "You look cold." The man hesitated, then stepped inside slowly, almost apologetically. Reagan closed the door behind him. The room was small, but warm enough. The man stood there a moment, looking around as if unsure where he belonged. "Please," Reagan said, pulling out a chair. "Sit." The man sat down, his hands resting on the table. They were shaking not violently, but with the subtle tremor of someone who had carried too much for too long. Reagan poured him a cup of coffee. The man accepted it with both hands, nodding gratefully. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the man said quietly, "You don't know me." Reagan smiled gently. "That's all right. Most people I meet start that way." The man let out a weak laugh, one that sounded broken around the edges. "I suppose so." He took a sip of the coffee, exhaled. then looked up at Reagan with eyes that seemed older than his years. "You look like your mother," he said. Reagan froze. His breath caught in his chest. His heartbeat stumbled. "What?" he whispered. The man nodded slowly, his eyes softening with something like sadness. "Your mother, Nell. You look like her." Reagan felt the room tilt slightly, not enough to lose balance, but enough to make the air feel heavier. How do you know my mother?" he asked carefully. The man set his cup down. "I knew her a long time ago," he said. "Before you were born. Before life took us in different directions." Reagan's pulse pounded in his ears. 100 questions formed in his mind at once, but his voice wouldn't let any of them out. The man looked down at his trembling hands. "I should have come sooner," he whispered, "but I was a coward. And then too much time passed. And after enough years, you start believing it's too late." Reagan's throat tightened. "Too late for what?" The man's voice cracked. "For me to see you," he said. "For me to talk to you. For me to tell you the truth." Reagan stared at him, breath shallow. "What truth?" The man lifted his gaze, eyes filled with decades of regret. "I'm your father." The words struck the room like thunder in a quiet field. Reagan's heart stopped. The world seemed to narrow, shrinking to only the man's voice echoing inside his chest. "I'm your father," the man repeated softly. "And I've come because there are things I should have said a long time ago." Reagan staggered back a step, gripping the edge of the table. "My father," he whispered. "But I already have." "I know," the man said quickly. "I know. The man who raised you. He did what I couldn't. He stayed. He tried. He was better at being brave than I ever was." Reagan's breath trembled. The man continued, voice shaking harder now. "But Nell, she and I, before she met him, we had something. Not something small. Not something careless. Something real." Reagan's knees weakened. He sank slowly into the chair across from the man. "My mother never told you," the man finished gently. "I know. She wanted to protect you, and maybe she wanted to protect me too." Reagan's mind was spinning, 1,000 memories colliding with new meaning. His mother's quiet gestures, her rare moments of sadness, her strange softness whenever she looked at him for too long, and now this. The man blinked rapidly, tears forming. "I don't expect anything from you. Not forgiveness, not kindness, not even understanding. I just needed to see you once, to see the person you became, to see if you were all right." Reagan stared at him, at the tired face, the trembling hands, the eyes that looked too much like something he saw in his own mirror on hard mornings. "Why now?" Reagan whispered. The man swallowed. "Because I'm sick," he said softly, "and I don't know how much time I have left." Reagan felt a sharp pain in his chest, deep and sudden. "I spent years being too ashamed to knock on this door," the man continued. "But shame is a heavy thing to carry alone. And tonight, I couldn't carry it anymore." Silence filled the room, heavy, still, fragile. Reagan leaned forward, voice soft but steady. "What's your name?" he asked. The man exhaled shakily, as though the question itself was a gift he didn't deserve. "Thomas," he whispered. "Thomas Avery." Reagan repeated it quietly. Thomas Avery, a name he had never heard, a name that might change everything. The man wiped his eyes. "I don't want to ruin your life with this. I just wanted you to know the truth before I'm gone." Reagan looked down at his hands, hands that trembled just like the stranger's, and for the first time, he asked himself the question he had been afraid to ask since opening the door. Is this man telling the truth? And even if he is, what does that mean for me? But Reagan didn't say any of that aloud. He simply whispered, "Why me? Why now?" The man's answer was soft. "Because you deserved to know who I really was," he said. "And because I couldn't bear the thought of dying without ever seeing my son." Reagan felt something break inside him, not something painful, but something like an old lock turning, letting light into a room that had been closed for years. Before he could speak again, the hallway light flickered, then dimmed, then steadied. Both men looked up, and the moment hung there, suspended between truth and uncertainty, father and son, past and future. Then the man whispered, "Ronnie, may I tell you the rest?" And Reagan nodded slowly, silently, the rest of the stranger's story, the truth of his past with Nell, the reason he left, the reason he never returned, and the final revelation that would shake Reagan to his core. Thomas. Avery's hands trembled as he held the warm cup between his palms. The steam drifted upward, curling into the dim air like something trying to escape. He stared into the coffee for a long moment before speaking again, as if collecting fragments of a life he had spent years trying to forget. Reagan sat still, more still than he had ever been, his breath shallow, his heart beating unevenly. Everything inside him felt suspended between disbelief and a strange, fragile curiosity. Thomas finally lifted his gaze. "Your mother," he began softly, "was the kindest soul I ever knew. Kind in a way the world doesn't teach anymore. Kind in a way that makes a man want to be better than he is." Reagan swallowed hard. "How did you meet her?" Thomas smiled faintly, the kind of smile people give when remembering something warm they no longer have. "At the church. She was singing with the choir. I remember thinking her voice didn't just fill the room, it softened it." Reagan felt his chest tighten. He knew that voice. He had grown up with that voice comforting him through storms, bad dreams, and hard days. "We were young," Thomas continued, "too young to understand how delicate life can be. I loved her. I loved her more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." He paused, eyes glistening. "And she loved me too." Reagan felt the room tilt slightly. "But she married someone else." "Yes," Thomas whispered, "because I left." Reagan frowned. "Why?" Thomas closed his eyes. The silence grew heavy. "I was a coward," he said softly. "Life scared me. Responsibility scared me. Being enough for someone like her, it terrified me." He looked down at his hands. "I had dreams, but no direction. Hope, but no discipline. I thought leaving town would help me find myself. I told her I'd be gone just a few months. She begged me not to go, but I did." He sighed deeply. "And when I realized what I'd thrown away, it was too late. She had moved on. She had found someone who stayed." Reagan felt a flicker of anger rise inside him, not for himself, but for his mother, who had carried so much more than she ever let her son see. "She never told me any of this," Reagan whispered. Thomas nodded. "She wouldn't. Nell protected everyone, even me. She wanted you to grow up without confusion, without the weight of my mistakes." Reagan stared at Thomas, searching for truth in every line of his face, in every tremble in his voice. Thomas drew a shaky breath, and when she found out she was expecting, she wrote to me. Reagan's heart jolted, hard. "My mother wrote to you." Thomas nodded. "One letter. She said she was expecting a child. She didn't ask me to come back. She didn't ask for anything. She just thought I should know." Reagan felt something twist painfully in his stomach. "I wanted to return," Thomas said. "I swear I did. I packed a bag. I bought a train ticket. I even made it halfway to her before I turned around." Reagan's eyes widened. "You turned around?" Thomas's voice cracked. "I thought she'd be better without me." The words were barely a whisper. "I thought if I came back, I'd ruin her life again. So I told myself leaving was the right thing. Noble." Even he exhaled slowly. "But it wasn't noble. It was fear dressed as selflessness." Reagan leaned back in his chair, breathing unsteady. Thomas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I've lived with that decision for decades. I watched from afar, whenever I could. Not close, never close. Just enough to know you were safe, that you had a home, that she found someone who loved you and your brother the way I should have." Reagan's voice trembled. "So you watched us grow up?" Thomas nodded. "When I could. Birth announcements, a few newspaper clippings, the church bulletin once in a while. I saw your name listed as having sung at a Christmas service when you were a boy. I kept that clipping for years." Reagan blinked hard, stunned. "I knew you went to Eureka College." Thomas continued softly. "I knew you were working at the radio station. I never reached out. I didn't want to disrupt your life. I didn't think I had the right." Reagan looked away, chest tight. Thomas swallowed. "But every year, I thought about knocking on your door, just once, just to see you, to hear your voice, to know if you were all right." He lifted his shaky hand to his chest. "But fear is a slow poison. It convinces you tomorrow will be easier, and tomorrow becomes 30 years. The clock ticked softly on the wall. Tick, 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 dot. Then Thomas whispered, "And now, I'm running out of tomorrows." Reagan felt something inside him falter, a breath, a thought, a piece of certainty he didn't know he needed. "What's wrong?" Reagan asked quietly. Thomas hesitated. "My heart," he admitted. "Doctors say I don't have much time left. Months, maybe. Some days I feel like I have less." Reagan's hand tightened around the edge of the table. "And before I go," Thomas said, "I needed to see you once. Even if it meant you'd ask me to leave the moment I told you who I was." Reagan didn't speak. He couldn't speak. Thomas's voice softened even more, barely audible now. "I didn't come to take anything from you. Not your loyalty to the man who raised you. Not your love for your mother. Not even your forgiveness." He looked directly into Reagan's eyes. "I came to give you something. A truth. A truth I should have given you long ago." Reagan felt his throat tighten painfully. "Why tell me at all?" Thomas smiled sadly. "Because a son should know where he comes from, even if where he comes from is flawed. Even if the man who gave him half his blood was too broken to give him anything else." The quiet that followed was not empty. It was full, heavy, human. Reagan finally whispered, "Why didn't you come when I was a boy? I would have wanted to know you." Thomas looked like the words struck him physically. His face crumpled. "I know," he whispered. "That's the part that destroys me every night." Reagan's vision blurred unexpectedly. He blinked hard, shaking his head. Thomas stood slowly, placing a hand on the back of the chair to steady himself. "I should go," he said. "I've taken enough of your night, maybe enough of your peace." Reagan stood too, heart pounding. "Where will you go?" Thomas shrugged gently. "Back to my room. I'm staying in a boarding house nearby. Doesn't matter much where I am these days." He moved toward the door. Reagan felt panic rise, raw, unfamiliar, choking. "Wait." Thomas turned. Reagan's voice broke. "You came all this way," he said. "All this time. You knocked on my door, and now you're just leaving." Thomas's face twisted with emotion he couldn't hide. "I don't want to hurt you," he whispered. "And staying might." Reagan shook his head. "I don't know what to feel right now. I don't know what any of this means. But don't walk out like this." Thomas swallowed hard. "I didn't expect kindness from you. You owe me nothing." "That doesn't mean I feel nothing," Reagan said, voice trembling. Thomas's breath hitched. For the first time, Reagan stepped closer, close enough to see the tears gathering in the older man's eyes. "What do you want from me?" Reagan asked quietly. Thomas shook his head. "Nothing," he whispered. "Just to know your face, to hear you speak, to know you grew into a good man. That's enough for me." Reagan stared at him, at the lines etched by regret, at the exhaustion carved into his posture, at the resemblance he had been too stunned to notice earlier. Then, before he could second guess it, Reagan placed a hand gently on Thomas's shoulder. "Sit back down," he said. "Please." Thomas's lip trembled. He nodded slowly and returned to the table. Reagan sat across from him again, softer this time. For a moment, they just breathed in the same space, father and son, stitched together by truth, regret, and a quiet hope neither dared to express fully. Thomas finally whispered, "I don't know how to be a father." Reagan's voice cracked. "I don't know how to be a son," he whispered back. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, fragile, tentative, healing. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but openness. A door that had stayed locked for decades had finally cracked open. Thomas reached into his coat, slowly, and pulled out a folded, worn piece of paper. "I brought something," he said. "Something I wrote years ago." Reagan stared at it. "A letter," Thomas whispered. "For you. I never sent it." Reagan felt his breath leave his body. His own unsent letter flashed through his mind. The drawer, the ink-stained page, the trembling hands. Thomas placed the letter gently on the table, sliding it toward him. Reagan didn't open it. Not yet. He simply rested his hand on top of it. Thomas exhaled a quiet, relieved breath. "Thank you," he whispered, "for letting me say this, for letting me see you." Reagan's voice was soft, but steady. "This doesn't end tonight," he said. "Not if you don't want it to." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve that," he whispered. Reagan nodded. "Maybe not, but you knocked on my door, and that counts for something." Thomas covered his face with one trembling hand. For the first time, he cried. Reagan didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply let the moment exist, to lives meeting in a place neither expected to stand. When Thomas finally composed himself, Reagan walked him to the door. As Thomas stepped into the hallway, he turned back. "Ronnie," he whispered. "Yes." Thomas's voice softened into something deep, raw, fatherly, even if only for a moment. "I'm proud of you." Reagan felt the breath punch out of him. Thomas continued. "I don't deserve to say that, but I needed you to hear it." Reagan's eyes burned. "Thank you," he whispered. "Truly." Thomas nodded once, slowly, with the weight of an entire lifetime, and walked down the dim hallway. Reagan watched until he disappeared. Then he closed the door softly, leaning his forehead against it, breathing unevenly. The letter sat on the table behind him, waiting. He walked to it slowly, picked it up with steady hands, and held it against his chest. And that night, the night a knock changed everything. Reagan understood something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Sometimes the people who break us are the ones who need us the most when they finally ask to be let in. If this story reached you, if it stirred something quiet inside your heart, your like, comment, and subscription keep these gentle memories alive and help more people find stories that remind us of our humanity.